Oh, good. There's somebody else here. I was wondering.
Hi, good morning.
Morning. I feel like I need to
We're
move.
a little early, but there we go.
Oh, there's Scott. Okay. Yeah, I got on here a couple of minutes early and nobody else was there. There's everybody. Scott, you're muted.
I forget you join these things muted and start talking. So how you guys doing today?
I'm great. I would like to experiment with sharing my screen real quick and make sure what you guys see is what I want you to see.
Okay, sounds good.
I'd like to see what you don't want us to see.
There you go.
Well, let's look at the camera at this point. Let's see if this. So do you actually see the presentation, or what do you see?
I'm seeing the presentation, but with your notes or whatever are the next slide on the right. So you're not quite in presentation mode.
I am actually in presentation mode, but I'm just trying to figure out which one of these.
Hey, Elizabeth.
Hello, everybody.
All right, so how do I do this?
So I'm going to have to move the order around because Dr. Chester might be a hair late, but he is from Arizona State, my alumni school. So, I have to give him a little.
I won't hold that against you.
But I do like NAU too. I saw Gordon Lightfoot up there just a few decades ago. Back when he was still young. I don't know about me, but
yeah, well, at least that name I recognize. When they talk about the concerts these days, I have no idea what they're talking about.
So who would like to go first?
One more shot. How's that look?
That is good. Click to the next screen.
So then I can go to my next slide.
You might have to do it from the bottom left-hand corner. Yeah, okay. Cool.
Perfect.
All right. So we're good.
That's a really pretty building, that first one there.
That is the oldest building on our campus. That is Morrill Hall. It was built in 1881. The university dates to 1874. And that's our very Jeffersonian quad that was designed after the University of Virginia at Charlottesville. It was designed by Thomas Jefferson.
Nice.
So, yeah, all right. So stop sharing. Okay, good. It works.
Do you mind if I play with mine real quick?
Please do.
Okay.
I made you all co-hosts as well. I don't know that has any pluses, but it definitely doesn't have any minuses. So.
And I've got the same. What did you do, John, to get that?
So what I did is from this view where you are right now, hit the stop sharing button. Then, but don't exit the PowerPoint thing. Then Alt Tab or whatever you do to get back to Zoom in front. Hit share screen again and then pick the presentation screen. It gives you the option of which screen you're going to share.
Oh, okay.
So pick the presentation screen.
And I think it liked my other screen for some reason. So let me try this again.
There you go.
Aha.
Perfect.
Yes?
Yep.
Got it. Perfect.
Good. I'm glad we did this.
Yeah.
Yeah, so am I, because this is the first time I've moderated a Zoom. I've been on plenty of them, but I haven't moderated any of them.
I came into work. I'm normally on a remote work schedule. I came into work because my internet connection at home lately has been just not quite good enough bandwidth wise. So it's fine to listen to something. I just don't want to have it stutter when I'm presenting.
Right.
So Elizabeth, quick question. Do you want to start it or you just want me to start it? How do you want to do that?
Why don't you start it off as chapter president? You're officially the host.
That's true.
And
that means I get the big bucks,
that's exactly what that is. So yeah, you can just welcome everyone to the chapter meeting and the presentations. And then I was just going to put in a pitch for Connect and tell people that whatever questions, or conversations that don't get completed or answered after this, that your chapter community in Connect is a good place to continue the conversation. That's a lot of C's. hopefully I don't trip over my tongue with all of that.
Oh, well.
And then let you guys take it away from there. I don't want to spend too much time talking about other stuff when everybody's here for the presentation. So.
Okay, then I'll just welcome everybody, then turn it to you, then you turn it back to me. I'll introduce. What I'm going to do for you guys is I'm just going to say who you are, where you're from, and then you could do a further introduction when it's your time. So, John, University of Reno or the University of Northern Arizona, who wants to go first?
It doesn't matter to me.
Okay, John, you just won.
And if you do stay at, it's the University of Nevada.
I know, the University of Nevada, Reno. I know, I got that right. Even though I am an ASU dude. Hey, I got the Ed Pass up there for you guys. So I spent plenty of time on your campus. It's a very pretty campus.
Yeah, you know us well, but I used to joke that the University of Reno actually is a card dealing school downtown. I don't know if that's still true, but actually at one point it was when I first came here in the early 90s.
I will remember that, I promise. Besides, I have all your names and everything there, so I can't really screw it up too badly because I can't.
Yeah, I have your email up on a window also, the one that lists all everybody's names in the order we were going to go in, but it's okay. Just because it's nice. Okay,
and you pronounce your last name Sagebeil?
Yes.
Sagebeil, okay. And Stam?
It's
Stam.
it's imported.
Okay. Stam, okay. And Manor, I can do that one. Thank you.
It's Manor, actually.
Manor. Okay. So I can't do it.
But if it makes you feel better for both of us, everybody says it exactly the way you said it.
It's
Yeah,
true. So it's fine.
I blame that on my education at ASU. So you guys getting cooler up there today at NAU?
Snow on Monday.
Really?
Hopefully, we'll see. We'll see. It is going to get very cool. So we've been in the mid to high 70s since last week, and it's been glorious. And then as of Friday, Saturday, it starts dipping down into the 60s. And they said there is a 60% chance of precipitation, which we will take.
Yeah,
and,
we would.
They're saying a couple of inches of snow. We will see if the snow gets here. I would expect minimally up on the mountain. The mountain will get covered, which is.
Yeah, we're not going to get any of that. We were 70, I think 79 yesterday. We're supposed to be 60 or 61 today. Sunday.
Are you down in Phoenix?
No, I'm in Reno as well right now.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yes. So, and then on Sunday, we're only supposed to get to like 41 or 42 for a high.
Oh, wow.
That's so crazy.
I know.
That sounds pretty cold for Reno.
Oh, we get cold during the winter.
We're cold. I mean, the airport is 4,500 feet. That's about the lowest point in the valley. And you know, every 100 feet you go up is more,
Sure.
more snow and everything else. My house is actually at almost 6,000 feet up Mount Rose Highway, and
Wow.
it makes a huge difference between that and work.
Yeah, but it's so nice that you can drive and within an hour you can warm up. That's the thing I love about Arizona.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could get
I could never live in the heat of Phoenix or Tucson.
Phoenix is a bit much.
Oh my God, when it gets, cool up here, it is nice that, in 50 minutes we can be in Camp Verde or Sedona and go hiking, and it's nice.
Yeah, I'm heading to Tucson in November, middle of November. That's about the right time to go to Tucson.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay, so we're good with these. So is everybody can they just get in now?
Yep.
Elizabeth, or do you have to let them in?
Nope, they will be able to start joining, and I think we're beginning to see a few people start to join in. We've got 7 minutes to go, so we'll just let people join as they come in, and then we can talk about whatever we feel like talking about. Maybe people join in. But then, yeah, once we hit the actual hour, we'll see how many people we have. I was actually just checking registration numbers from this morning. There are 31 people who are registered. So that's nice. That's a big group. That includes you guys, of course, but that's a nice big group. And Scott, you did get a new chapter member today.
Wow. We are
Barbara Mork joined from University of New Mexico.
Yes. New Mexico, we got them again. A whole new state for us.
That's fantastic.
I was hoping so. So she was
Yep.
nice. She presented 2 weeks ago on their transportation issues during COVID-19 on the University of New Mexico campus. So
Yeah, I did say, for all of the, obviously any university has challenges, even in the best of times.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I've said that once this COVID, I will never complain about driver shortages, bus breaking down. If we don't have to deal with that and COVID, I'm good.
yeah.
Yeah, Scott, I don't know if you've seen the latest dashboard, but Washoe County is.
We're becoming a disaster.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
We are currently, in terms of new cases per day, we are at the highest we have ever been this entire pandemic.
Wow.
We are truly in a third wave, if you want to call it that. And it's different from Clark County. Clark County is sort of stabilized. Clark County is Las Vegas. And we do not look good. And it's not entirely the university's fault, although it is somewhat. And we, students can't control them that well. But we have decided we're going, in fact, I will mention this, between the time I made these slides and now, the university announced we are going all online as of Monday after Thanksgiving weekend. And we are canceling spring break. We're starting spring semester a week later, and there will be no spring break because the theory is students are going to leave, go somewhere, pick up COVID, come back, spread it around. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, the students are kind of the hard thing for everybody, it seems like, with the universities. So
yeah, and there have been a number of off-campus parties, gatherings, whatever you want to call them, that were primarily students here, and where there were quite a bit of spread. We've got a few. I mean, we've got a number of cases here. 360, 370, something like that, in students.
oh wow.
It's a small fraction of the campus, I guess, but it's a small fraction of the total community load. But those students are not just on campus; they're also in the community, and it's just
Right.
It's depressing because I got the 2-year pilot project of our EdPass program up there, and we were just kicking butt. I mean, we went from ridership at the University of Nevada, Reno. See, I'll practice. About 2,000 with the old Wolf Pass a month to almost approaching 10,000 a month. And then the impressive thing is, even with the pandemic and with no classes on the university, we were still around 3,000 for the last couple of months.
Well, there is still a lot going on the university campus. There are still some in-person classes and laboratories, particularly. They've done a very clever thing, I think, with the laboratory classes that they wanted to continue running in terms of sort of doing them in blocks. I can explain that real briefly. And then the graduate students, research associates, all those kind of folks are still coming here and need still transportation. So, but those numbers are very good, because I keep hearing nationally, at least, that public transit ridership is down because people are afraid that's an exposure route, where it probably really isn't.
Our university, so we've got about over 7,000 students that are living on campus. We hold in-person classes at about 30 to 50% capacity of the normal, and students they alternate. So if a class is Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you might be in the Monday cohort, that's the day you're able to attend in person. We also, the university just decided so what we've been doing, we call it the NAU Flex model, which means that, again, class size is in person is reduced 30 to 50%, and students alternate which day they go on. We are also going to our classes actually end November 20th. Our semester is over November 20th.
Oh, wow.
And then we're going to mimic, it was just announced for our spring semester, we will mimic what we did this fall, which is the residence hall classes will start on the 11th. The residence halls it'll all be online with the exception of those labs that have to begin in person. Residence halls will open over a 2-week period. So slowly letting people, students will have to be tested before they come in, provide that confirmation. So we'll really slowly roll in students moving back into the halls, and then in person in this flexible model will start January 25th, no spring break, and we're out by the end of April. Our transit is still up and running. We are seeing about 6,000 a week, but to put that in perspective, in a normal year, we see about 10,000 a day. So it is significantly lower, 7,000, probably about 6,000 to 7,000 a week right now. Yeah, so our number, but it honestly, we still maintained our entire staffing, all of our full-time drivers, as well as our students, to ensure that we can have reduced capacities on the buses. We've got 6 feet behind the driver. All of those safety protocols are in place, but still being utilized well. Yeah, but we have a lot of students. I mean, it's not the norm. You know, normally at a change of class time, we have a pedestrian and bike path that runs through the center of campus, and it's normally packed at the change of class time. Or if you go to any of the dining facilities, there's a line out the door. Nothing like that. So it's really easy to go in and get a bagel or get some cabrizos, which is our Mexican takeout, but very different than normal.
Or you should say very different to what used to be normal.
What used to be normal. And I anticipate, you know, we do, as everybody else I'm sure is having the similar kinds of conversations, it does give us time to think about how might we continue to do things differently when things get back to the new normal.
Yeah.
So like remote working, I mean, specifically for being more of a sustainable campus, looking at how often are people having to transit, and looking to say, if we can do more online and remote for employees or students, would that help our carbon footprint?
Yeah, it's interesting to see a lot of organizations using this as an opportunity to reevaluate carbon footprint, because that's not something that is huge. Maybe it's more of a focus with universities, but I know on kind of the employer side, sustainability is not a big focus in the same way that traffic congestion, time savings, money savings is.
In discussions just yesterday, I was in a discussion about we want to take a number of buildings right after Thanksgiving or you know, right at Thanksgiving break. We're going to shut them down. I mean, like bare minimum heating to maintain safety, you know, for the pipes. I mean, like
Right.
we are not allowed to go into this building.
Wow.
Kind of controls to cut utility costs. And they're going to kill all the lights. They're going to, you know, lock it up and seal it. We have card key access to a lot of our buildings, so we can do that. Actually, I mean, we can physically prevent people from getting into their own office.
Wow.
And we're going to do that this winter because we have an extended break. It's going to be essentially Thanksgiving through end of January, and they're looking at that from the utility standpoint. I'm looking at it from a carbon standpoint. I mean, facilities wants to just save money, but money is carbon in this economy right now. So.
Yeah, sustainability is huge. Actually, here in Flagstaff, the city has declared a climate emergency, and the university is currently working on our own climate action plan to be carbon neutral by a certain date. We have not yet. We literally have a consultant hired. We're building our plan. It will align with the city's plan, but significantly looking at reducing our carbon footprint.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool. Scott, I see it's 1:02, and we've got probably 2/3 of our registered attendees. So if you want, we can give it another minute or two. We're having such a great conversation already.
I know. I was going to say, who needs a webinar? This has been very interesting. What's going on? This has been a good
But
conversation.
we can come back to this, right? Once
That's true.
Have an opportunity to follow up. So yeah, it's nice to just chat with people and compare notes. So
I think that's the thing a lot of people miss is that there's no, just having, a regular meeting where, you discuss the things that you want to discuss for 45 minutes. And then the last 15 minutes is you talking about, normal things and what's going on with everybody and, what they're doing that's new, what they're doing that doesn't work kind of stuff. And now you don't really get that as much. So
Actually, I find a lot of the Zoom meetings end up that way. We end up just sort of catching up on what is going on because it is valuable. It definitely is. And I mean, my background, for those of you who don't know, my background is in air pollution, particularly from mobile sources, cars and trucks. That's where my research background, my PhD and all that is in. And it was fascinating to me. I don't know how many of you saw a lot of the data that was coming out of all over the world back in March, looking at the reductions in air pollution. I mean, it was so dramatic.
It was.
Literally, it had been generations since the air had been that clean.
Yep, you can see things you normally don't see, which is
right, which is mind-boggling.
Well, it's not actually. I mean, I hate to say this, but it's one of these things that, like, those of us who study, regional, especially local regional air pollution, city air pollution, we know it's mostly mobile sources. You stop people from driving, or people stop driving voluntarily, however that equation happens. It's going to clean up. The cycling time of most of those visible pollutants, not the invisible ones, but the visible pollutants, cycling time is 24 hours. So it doesn't take long for it to clean up. It really, truly is dramatic.
And one of the positives come out of COVID, actually, that's one of the things our university, who I don't think had ever considered allowing employees to work remotely, is now seeing that that could actually be one of the biggest benefits to helping to go carbon neutral.
Well, especially if you can have the people who are on campus concentrated in fewer buildings, with appropriate distancing and whatnot, but to minimize the utility cost and the others. I mean, the problem is, otherwise I've got a 7.5 million gross square foot campus. I don't want to maintain that at the same level if I've got 100% occupancy. So that's the challenge, how we can do that.
Okay, well, I hate to stop this conversation because this is very, very interesting. We could do a whole webinar right here just discussing it. But I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. My name's Scott Miklos. I'm the Valley of the Sun chapter of ACTS president, and we'll be moderating this session. We have 4 very good speakers. I'm going to introduce them briefly in a second, but I'd like to give a few moments to Elizabeth from ACT to kind of bring us up to date on a few of ACT's things. So Elizabeth.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Valley of the Sun chapter webinar today. For those of you who are ACT members, you may be aware of the fact that Valley of the Sun is the smallest chapter, but I would say one of the fastest growing and dynamic chapters. And this webinar and your attendance here is a good example of that. So thank you for joining us and welcome. I'm not going to do a whole lot because I want to focus on the conversation today, but I do just want to throw out a pitch for our new Connect online community platform. I think there'll probably be a lot of conversation that will come out of this, and I think that the Connect platform is a good place to continue that conversation. So if you haven't yet, go in, set up your account, finalize it, make sure you join the, this conversation will probably go into the Valley of the Sun chapter community. Update your email settings for each community that you join. So if you want to follow this conversation, just look, when you go onto the page, I'd show you, but I'm not going to worry about it. But you'll see the heading, and then there's a little settings button next to it. Click that button, update your email setting, and then you'll get notifications for all the discussions that are going on. I'm going to put the web page in the chat. Don't do that now. Wait until the webinar is over so you can focus on the conversation. But definitely, I think this will be a good opportunity to get some conversation started and keep it going. So with that, I will turn it back over to Valley of the Sun.
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. For all our members, thanks for being here today. And hopefully we have some new people that are looking in. I know we have some people from the University Council that registered to see this. So hopefully you got on a little early. We had some interesting conversation going on. We have 4 speakers today. They'll each present, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. And if you could put your questions in, what is it, Elizabeth? Is it in the chat or in the question place?
You can go ahead and put them in the chat, and I'll keep an eye on it. If there's something that's pertinent, I will try to bring it up in the moment, but if not, we'll probably save a lot of questions for the end. If you have a question and you don't want to interrupt, go ahead and put it in the chat, and before you forget, because if you're like me, you might forget between now and later on.
And I understand that. Thank you. So we have 4 very good speakers today from 3 different universities. We have Dr. Sagebeil from the University of Reno, Nevada. We have Judy, I'm going to mess this up again. Not Manor, it's, help me out, Judy.
Manor.
Manor, thank you. Manor from Northern Arizona University up at Flagstaff. And also from there is Erin. Strom. I said that wrong too, but that from the.
It's all good.
Thank you. And then our last speaker will be Dr. Chester from the Arizona State University, my alma mater. So Dr. Sagebeil is going to go first. They'll each have a bit of time to share their screen and do a presentation. Like Elizabeth said, if you had some questions, put them in the chat box. At the end, hopefully we'll have plenty of time. You can unmute yourself and ask our speakers whatever you like. So at this time, I'll turn it over to the good doctor.
Okay, thank you very much, Scott, and Elizabeth, and everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is John Sagebeil. I'm going to do this screen share thing. Let's make sure that we get the right one. I'm going to talk about the title of the talk. What I put up here is, excuse me, post-COVID thinking at the University of Reno, because I think we had the webinar a couple of weeks ago that talked quite a bit about transportation, and I know I think all of us here on this panel today are at least active in or interested in transportation issues. But I want to go a little bit around that. My title actually is Assistant Director of Environmental Programs at UNR. That includes sustainability. It also includes all the nasty stuff. So I get all the e-waste, hazardous waste, industrial hygiene, lead, asbestos, horrible building materials, PCBs, all that other kind of stuff. So I have a team of people who I work with, but that's kind of where I come from. So this is our Jeffersonian quad modeled after the University of Virginia, designed by Thomas Jefferson, and that is Morrill Hall. Many campuses, I think probably maybe listening in here, have a Morrill Hall named after I believe it was Justice Morrill who authored the Land Grant Universities Act, that was known as the Morrill Act. So we are the Land Grant University for the state of Nevada, and have been around since 1874. That building has been standing since 1881. So when I talk about design and long-term thinking, we have a very long range that we're looking at when we're considering this. And considering what we're going to do with COVID and beyond. Just for a brief summary, let me see if that updated. There we go. So just as a quick overview of campus, we're about 290 acres just north of the urban core of Reno. Interstate 80 almost is our south border, not quite. That's Interstate 80. At the bottom of this graphic image, the campus goes all the way up here to McCarran Boulevard at the top, and is bordered roughly by Virginia Street on the west and Evans Street on the east. Kind of an hourglass-shaped campus. We have a lot of density, and the old quad, that photograph that was on my first slide, is right down here. We have a lot of density of buildings in this lower campus and not a lot of parking. There is a parking structure here. There's a parking structure next to the football stadium. There's a lot of open space up here in the north with lots of parking and not a lot of offices. So there is a parking structure right here that is ours. It's associated with our residential area, which is right here. And we're building a new parking structure. Let me think, where is it? Right about here. That's in planning. It's going to go in. The area's actually been leveled.
John.
Yes.
John, I hate to interrupt you, but can you either turn your volume up? That people are having a little trouble hearing you.
I don't know if I can up my microphone volume, but I can speak louder. That's for certain. And I was is that a little better if I just kind of maybe lean forward a little bit and speak a little louder? Good? Oh, Scott. Okay, yeah, that thumbs up. All right, I wasn't looking at you, sorry. So we're about 21,000 students, I think just a little bit less than that right now, about 6,000 staff. Most of them are not here right now. So we have very few students on campus. There are students living in our residence halls, but at a much lower density than normal. And a lot of staff are working remotely. I'm in my office today, but my normal work assignment is remote, and I'm in here because there's a better internet connection at home. As I mentioned, we have a lot of density in the south, the parking in the north. And then we have these core areas in our design. So there's sort of an engineering quad, if you want to think of it that way, a group of buildings surrounding that. The north the northeast side of the campus is our medical school, and the medical quad's also where our nursing school is, and a lot of associated things. So we try to create a design that brings a lot of the associated degrees or associated programs together, and that has actually been by design. So I'm very interested in design and how that fits into both how we live and how we plan and operate. And I think it's going to be really important going forward with COVID. So a few of the responses the university has had to COVID, the photograph there, the gentleman in the middle with the dark blue Nevada mask on is Brian Sandoval. He's our new president. He took over on the 5th of October. So yeah, welcome to the campus, Mr. Sandoval. And here's a huge problem for you. There had been a planned transition of leadership prior to COVID, and then the existing president, or the prior president, Dr. Mark Johnson, decided to stay on so there could be a little bit more of a time to allow for some of this. But there is a policy we have that our masks are required everywhere except where I am, which is in a single occupancy office with the door closed. So if this door were open, or if I were anywhere on campus, including outdoor spaces where this photograph was taken, I'm required to be wearing a mask. Our flexible work arrangements have allowed for us to work from home, and I do quite a bit of my work from home unless I physically have to be here to do something. But we have tolerated a lot of electronic document signing, and we have policies accepting electronic document signing and kinds of things that I think were certainly on their way, but they were pushed into service by COVID. In terms of education, we have what we call a high flex or a hybrid flexible learning mode. We have both in-person and distance lectures. I think much like a lot of universities are doing, if we can keep the occupancy of the room well below 50%, then they will allow that. So we're using our larger lecture halls for smaller classes. Most of the very large lecture classes are online, entirely online. And our laboratories have done a number of things, including they're doing some by demonstration, by online, some activities are online. The classes that they feel cannot be done, the laboratory that cannot be done online, are being done with a sort of a group model. So there's fewer students, and you are with the same smaller group of students for an intense period of time. So you may go through 4 laboratories in a week with a small group of students, and then you're done with that section of those things. And the next week, they have a different pod of students sort of coming through. And it's designed to minimize the number of people that you may be exposed to in those rooms. We have a lot of laboratory spaces, teaching laboratory spaces, so we've been using those, and we've been extending the classroom times until later at night. And much lower room density is in the residence halls, where rooms may have been 3 people in the past, or 4 or 3, they're now down to 2. We have special rooms and floors in some of the halls that are for suspected cases that are quarantining, especially quarantine spaces. So thinking about all this makes me think about this idea of design. And I love this quote. I use it all the time. For those of you who don't know, William McDonough is an architect, a very famous green architect and sustainability thinker. And design is the first signal of human intention works for me on a number of levels. That again is my wonderful Jeffersonian quad. And the first level, of course, is what McDonough uses, which is what we design is what we intend. So if we design a system that pumps, gigatons of carbon into the atmosphere, that's what we intended. So we have to understand those intended consequences. I think McDonough would say there are no unintended consequences. There are only intended consequences. Those are our intentions. The other side of this that I kind of, it's a little more philosophical, is I think when humans began designing things, we began to have intention. I think that's kind of another way I like to think about it. And so I'm always drawn back to this quote to say, well, what are we doing, and how are we designing our spaces, and how are we planning for future? And I think of a post-COVID era, But I also think that that post-COVID era has to be informed by the experience of the last 7-8 months. And we have to be prepared to go back into this, because I think most of the epidemiological thinkers and virologists that I've read say this is not the last global pandemic that's going to come like this. So how do we address that? So specifically at the University of Nevada, Reno, I'm going to address this sort of in short term and long term. Short term, you know, we put up barriers like at reception desks. You have the clear plastic barriers where, you know, so you try to produce or try to minimize airflow between somebody who might be there and the person working that desk. Spacing indicators, the Nevada mascot is the wolf. So we are the wolf pack. And so we have these paw print stickers that are about this big, and they stick them around in places 6 feet apart. So trying to encourage people to look at those paw prints and saying that's how far apart we stay. They have been saturating, and this has been going on before COVID, but I know it is increased with this, both outdoor and indoor spaces with Wi-Fi, so that students can work or attend lectures if they don't have good signal at home, but they can be outdoors. They may not want to be when it gets really cold, but or spaced around in indoor spaces, so they don't have to be in computer labs, they don't have to be in other sorts of things. Again, closing of or removing tables and chairs in public spaces, spacing them farther apart to provide for that kind of spacing. And that's kind of our, you know, that's more of a response, I think. Oh, and I didn't mention the text-based cues. A lot of, to get certain transactions done that may need to be done face-to-face at a registrar's office or a cashier's office or something, you now have a number you text to and say, I want to, you know, get in line, essentially. And they'll say, okay, you'll be in about 15 minutes and we'll text you when it's closer. These systems are, it's a commercial system, I don't know the name of it, but they've been using that now on campus for pretty much all the major kind of direct interactions. And what it does is it prevents students from having to be lined up, so to speak, in a traditional queue. And then I think long term, you know, when it comes to the sort of the overall structure and design of the campus, I don't think we're going to change much. I think we were talking earlier, for those of you who sort of listened in on some of those earlier conversations about the value of face-to-face action. And I think we're going to want that. It's going to come and go as these pandemics, and I do believe there will be more, come and go. And I think that's a good thing that we don't change that too much, because I think fundamentally education is an interactive process, and it has to have that component at whatever level we can tolerate safety-wise. And I think our other functional design changes are going to be things like shutting down. What we're planning on doing is we're shutting down buildings after Thanksgiving, because we're going to go to all online instruction immediately following the Thanksgiving break, because they're concerned students are going away, may pick up the virus and bring it back. We've also eliminated spring break, and we are going to start our semester a week later in January. So again, the intent being not giving students that much of an opportunity to go away, get the virus and come back and bring it back to campus. That's the intent. We'll see what actually happens. But in between those periods, we are now making plans to shut down a lot of buildings to save utility costs. And you know, being the sustainability manager, I'm also looking at this carbon savings on our greenhouse gas inventory for the year. So this last point may be a very hopeful one, and that is the last point of my presentation. I really think that for the long term, for how we design buildings and classrooms and whatnot, if we're going to put up more new buildings, which I suspect we will, that we aren't going to change too much, but we are going to allow for that flexibility that provides the opportunities for response like the one we've been forced to. So I'm going to end the screen share there, because that's the end of the presentation. And thank you very much for this opportunity, Scott.
Thank you very much, John. We're now going to move to Northern Arizona, and Erin and Judy, you're up.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I'm Erin Stam. I'm the Director for University Transit Services at Northern Arizona University. And really, Judy she's the assistant director directly overseeing campus shuttle service, but I often share she is really the true leader of shuttle services, as she is the boots on the ground first responder for everything. And truly, she's been my mentor. Judy's worked at Northern Arizona University and in transit for over 20 years. I've only been here in this particular position for 10 years. And so I've learned much from her. And I'd like to think that we've learned from each other, especially as we try to move our department forward. I will share, I think there was confusion on the topics for this because I had received two different topics, one being COVID, how do we surrender COVID? And the other is universities leading for the future, planning for the future. And so our information today, we talked a lot about our planning for the future and not as much on the COVID stuff. I will tell you, we have done a lot in response to COVID, and I'd be happy to share that if people would like me to pivot. I'm pretty good at pivoting, especially, after COVID. I think we all are. But I'm going to share some of the information Judy and I have today. Judy and I are kind of a little more reserved. We didn't really want to share our bios. So you can read those if you want to, but suffice to say, we've both been at the university for many, many years. Let me see if I can. There's me. Like I said, Judy and I have learned some pretty hard lessons over our 10 years working together. And a lot of it's because we weren't actually invited to the table. It's taken us a while to convince others at the campus that working in transit as part of a core part of the planning process is instrumental in helping the campus to function efficiently, to get people where they need to go in a timely and safe manner, and to really control traffic on campus and try to deter people from bringing personal vehicles. So we have learned the hard way. One of our biggest lessons learned has been construction that we were the recipient of and not the initiator of. There have been two major projects on campus that occurred right in the heart of our transit loop of campus. Our campus is 700 acres. Much like the University of Nevada at Reno, we are a very long campus north to south. We do a loop of campus 5 days a week, 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. And on a regular year, we transit about 10,000 riders a day. A little quieter this year. So transit on our campus is truly a core part of how people get around. And when the construction occurred, it took out really our main intersection, forcing us to go out into the city of Flagstaff and use their busiest roadway to try to move 10,000 people a day. Because of that, we ended up using a roadway on the east side of our campus that really isn't next to anything. And so it was not part of our main corridor, but it actually, from that experience, we learned it actually allowed us to traverse campus much more quickly and effectively while staying on the campus and not having to deal with city traffic. So it was a very painful lesson learned, but through that, we actually got to see a benefit of how to better run our system. I'm going to have Judy talk about this transit spine, which was a great addition to our campus.
Yes, a couple of years ago, we added the transit spine. It runs from north to south on campus, on the northern part of the campus. And with that, we were able to create a safe corridor for bus rapid transit, as well as for pedestrians and bicycles. So it was a great addition to the campus. And it really improved our efficiency with the service.
And I will say that project was truly due to our partnership with Mountain Line, which is our city bus provider. That was their project. We were the recipient. It was a win-win. They benefited by being able to cross through the campus to get from one side of town to the other. We benefited as they are the local recipient for funds from the government. And so really they provided, through that grant, provided the majority of the funds. But it has been one of many very successful partnerships with our local city bus provider. Our campus master plan in years past, again, this is where when I came into transit, I learned very quickly that we were not at the table and we really needed to be. There was a campus master plan developed in 2010, and it had all these wonderful ideas for transit, and half of them would not work. And so we are currently underway with our new campus master plan, and thankfully, we now have better connections and relationships where we're part of that conversation and making sure that transit is a key core of the part of the master plan. Judy will talk a little bit about the results of some of those poor planning in the past.
We do have quite a few bus stops currently that are not pull-out bus stops. They are in-street stops, mostly at stop signs, but those can be a little bit dangerous. So, and then we have some other ones where they've built new buildings and things like that where we don't have a stop within a reasonable distance, walking distance. So we do have a little bit of work to do on that.
And as everybody who does transit knows, it has to be convenient if you want people to ride. And so our goal is really looking to how do we make it efficient and convenient for our campus population. So planning ahead truly is key. And like I said, us just developing our relationships with our campus and our off-campus partners has been key to that. We are now deeply involved with the campus master plan, which is critical. We actually, there's the photo in the frame here is actually, there was a new building coming to campus. And so Judy and I jumped on the project manager, figuratively speaking, and said, hey, since you're going to be doing construction in that area, this is one of those locations Judy talked about where we are stopping in the road. And this is one of our busiest intersection areas. It's the starting and stopping point of our entire service. So stopping in the road is not conducive to running an efficient service. And so we jumped on the project manager and said, how about we work on a bus pullout while we're over there? We're still working on the construction piece, but the design piece is well underway. And not only will it help transit for our regular service during the year, but it's right next to our University Sky Dome, which normally holds our commencement services, for which we move 40,000 people in a day. And it's very challenging to actually turn the buses around in that area. And so part of the design actually incorporates enough space that the buses can, driving southbound, turn around and start driving northbound. So that, again, getting on the forefront of planning has been key to being more successful. The future of transit, again, this is another thing that we are planning, something that we're working on right now with Mountain Line, who is our city bus partner. And again, they have been very successful in helping us to procure federal funding to help with the design to build a bus storage facility that would provide space for more sustainable buses, specifically electric. They are currently working on a zero emissions plan, and we are actually underway of working with our own zero emissions plan and looking at having most likely an electric bus fleet. Again, that requires a lot of planning, even though right now we don't have the funding necessarily for the construction or buying the buses. This design will actually help to get us closer to what those actual costs will be, so then we can apply for funds for that next step. The partnership, again, with the city has been integral, and it's a win-win. It's going to provide, because they run through our campus, it will provide them a location that they can actually store their buses, charge their buses, get through the campus. And for us, it's great to have a facility on campus. I think I was going to have Judy talk about the last two, which is investing in people and technology.
So one of the things that we do is we supplement our service with student bus drivers. So we train them to get their CDLs. We have designed an online CDL classroom through BB Learn, which is a technology platform that the university uses for online classes. We also have 2 third-party examiners who conduct the CDL exam. And we've just tried to make our training as efficient as possible, but also to turn out good, safe bus drivers. So the other thing with technology, I researched a program that's called Bus Genius. It was created by 2 professors, and they came up with an algorithm that keeps the buses at an equidistance spacing. And so therefore you do not have to, it basically eliminates your schedule, which is really, really nice. So you can have multiple buses on the same route and they won't bunch up, which is something that we also had a lot of issues with. It uses the GPS and the tablet on the bus, and it gives the driver a countdown when they pull into key bus stops. And you can add buses, you can take buses out, and it just recalculates and gives them the proper amount of countdown time before they have to leave, and keeps the buses separated, which is great. And then the other thing, we use ride systems, and with the automatic passenger counters, the really good thing about their system is on the application that the passengers look to check when the bus will be arriving. It also gives them a capacity on the bus. So they know if they're going to have to wait for another bus, if that bus is already full. So that's also a great technology that we have.
Yeah, and specifically with regards to COVID, one of the things that we did is we took those automated passenger counts and the bus capacity for each bus, we reduced it based on the capacity we felt was safe for our riders. So we were very quickly able to pivot that counter for students to give them information. Convenience and information, those are the things our riders want in order to feel that our service is the best one to use. The last component that I would talk about for, transit leading the future, universities leading the future for transit is really looking at multimodal. So as important as Judy and her campus shuttle service department is to me, I also realize that they can't do it by themselves. If we have students that live off campus or commute in, or those that don't have a vehicle, we need to make sure that all of our modes of transit are connected somehow. And even if that's through educating our users about all of the options that they have. We did do a multimodal assessment a couple of years ago, and what we looked at is between our pedestrians, our bicyclists, our shuttles, and our cars, where are our pinch points? What are the places that we need to improve upon so that it's safer and more convenient for all? We have a list of 20 different places now, and we are slowly chopping away at that. So that's really important for all modes of transit to share the space together. We are currently, again, working with our city bus partner, looking to develop a university student bus pass. We have a pilot program that was supposed to be underway. COVID has kind of gotten in the way of that, but we are hoping to move forward with that. That way, again, we can encourage, we only see about 30–35% of students that actually bring their car to campus. So it's not very high, but the more people we can encourage to not drive to campus, the better it is for our climate and our community. We were looking at bike share recently. We done an RFP. We had a vendor. We were really close, and unfortunately, due to COVID, the vendor did have to back out. But incorporating bike share, we've done a pilot program. We are looking, and again, that is actually a partnership with the city of Flagstaff. And so I find that planning and partnerships are the most important thing in moving transit forward. Scooters is a topic that is on the plan. I'm not sure where it's going to be on the plan, but it's something that comes up frequently, I know, at all universities, and something that we have to figure out where is their place, and they should have a place. We wouldn't want to exclude them. And then parking. Parking has a place in all of transit. Again, much like John, our campus is very long north to south. We do try to position our parking lots in the perimeter of campus so people minimizes the drive-through. We changed our parking permit zones so that people really only get one zone to park in during the day, which significantly reduced our campus congestion and our traffic in the middle, which allows our campus shuttle service to flow much more efficiently. So we can't look at transit or at shuttle in and of itself. It really has to be something that we look at holistically and plan for all the components to work better together. And that's all I've got.
Thanks very much. That was very interesting. I know a lot of people are already interested in your spacing program, as am I. So we'll get to that in a little bit. Our last speaker, I believe he's on now, is Dr. Chester from Arizona State University. And I know I saw him on here. If
I'm here.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, there you are. Good. So if you want to go ahead, you can share your screen and.
Thanks, folks, for inviting me, and I'm going to totally pivot as per the last point that was made. I'm not going to talk about COVID. I wasn't under the understanding that we wanted to talk about that. In terms of what the university is doing, I'm not the right person to be talking about that. I'm a faculty member. I experience it, but don't know sort of systematically what's going on at the university. What I wanted to do was sort of take a step back and talk about how ASU transportation is thinking about transportation in the future, how we are sort of setting ourselves up. There's roughly on the order of about 60 faculty members at ASU studying transportation predominantly. I would venture to say that that is probably the largest transportation program. We are probably the largest transportation program in the Southwest. I think if you draw a line south of the Bay Area, We're bigger than probably anywhere else. And there's a lot of work going on at ASU around the concept of resilience. So I'll talk a little bit about what that means and sort of give you guys a 100,000-foot perspective about what we at ASU, particularly in the School of Sustainable Engineering and the Built Environment, are doing to sort of position ourselves for thinking about transportation in the future. Okay, so I have been at ASU for about 8 years. Actually, I just got back from a sabbatical year at UCLA. So we were in Los Angeles for a year, and it was interesting to be away from home as COVID was happening. And it was interesting to kind of see in a fairly transit-rich city like Los Angeles, particularly on the West Side, how COVID paralyzed the transit system, in particularly public transit, right? And I think that there's a lot to learn from that experience. More specifically, I think there's a lot of questions we should be asking around how transportation in general, public, private, or otherwise, is able to remain viable, is able to provide functionality during periods of instability, right? So I'm going to make the argument here that the future, the next, let's say 100 to 200 years, is going to be marked by instability. We've largely designed our systems around stability, assumptions of stability. I'll talk about what that means, but I'm going to argue that instability is going to become far more common. It's not going to be the only thing that's happening, but it's going to become far more common. And there's going to be a tension. There's going to be a significant tension in our transportation systems around, how they're designed for stability and a reality of more instability. And I think that's going to question the viability of the systems that we have in place. And I think that's going to ultimately create decentralization in our systems. We're already starting to see this. You're going to see more players come to the table that do transportation, and we're going to diversify power and control of the system in ways that we have never seen in the past. So let me talk about those issues for a little bit. When I talk about resilience, guys, so resilience is like the new sustainability you'll hear. It means lots of different things, right? And I think that's okay. I think there's lots of good definitions. I think there's some bad definitions. But when I talk about resilience, I'm generally talking about the process that we use to navigate the increasing complexity that is the world that we're living in today. So I would venture to argue that resilience is emerging today in force. We're all of a sudden supposed to think about resilience because the world is becoming more complex very quickly in terms of cyber technologies, in terms of climate change, in terms of emerging and disruptive information flows around how we use transportation, right? All of a sudden, you've got like third-party apps that are directing people how to use transportation services in ways that take control away from that transit agency, so to speak, right? And I think resilience is emerging as a way to help us navigate this increasing complexity. That's the argument that I would make if you want to think about it that way. So we have largely built our transportation systems and our infrastructure writ large for the past. Literally the technologies that form the backbones of our systems are now 50 to 100 years old, right? Yeah, we've innovated. Yeah, we've layered new technologies on, but the core backbones of our system, whether it's bus, train, automobility, or otherwise, are literally decades, if not, a century old at this point, right? So the question that I want to ask you guys is, for whatever organization you're involved with, are you guys configured to deal with the problems of the next 100 years? Are you fundamentally configured to deal with problems of the next 100 years, right? Think end of century. And if the answer is, I have no idea, or no, then I would argue you should probably take a step back and reassess what your organization should be doing. And that's a monumental challenge. I recognize that. There's lots of forces that'll work against change. I recognize that. But I think that's the core question that infrastructure transportation agencies need to be asking going forward. So what do I mean by past goals? When I say that that transportation organizations, infrastructure organizations largely emerged 50 to 100 years ago, that's, largely at the end of the industrial era, when, sort of environmental conditions were relatively stable, growth was certainly happening, but growth was happening within what I would describe as sort of predictable envelopes, right? So you could say, look, I'm going to build this road, or I'm going to deploy this new transit line, and I'm going to do a demand forecast, and I'm probably going to be plus or minus 50% of what's actually going to, what that line is actually going to experience, so that road is going to actually experience, right? And for the most part, you'd be pretty much accurate in those predictions, right? In terms of how we set up governance, we largely set up our organizations in ways that govern around certain problem spaces, right? So lots of public agencies, state agencies, for example, have a traffic division, have a pavement division, right? So on and so forth. You'll see 5 or 6 of these divisions within the organization, right? More and more, the problems that we see transcend those divisional structures, right? So if I say to you, climate change, all right, well, that's a traffic problem, it's a pavement problem, it's an equity problem, it's a cyber, tech problem, it's a many different problems, and all of a sudden we need to be able to navigate across those divisions. When you have an extreme event, all of a sudden the divisions become almost irrelevant, right? You need teams that are able to respond quickly with sort of a diversity of expertise and so on, right? So the divisional structure is really good for stability. It's sort of this semi-autonomous structure. You allow the division to kind of do whatever it wants within the performance goals, as long as it's meeting the budget and performance goals and maybe doing some minor innovation, you're pretty much okay. Right? But again, going forward, the question is, are these structures, governance structures, and the technologies we rely on the right forms for the future? So the world has always been changing. Of course it has. But the world has never been changing at the rate that we see it changing today. Okay, so the change in population growth, the change in how we consume services, the change in environmental impact is growing at non-linear rates compared to the past century, okay? And we see this take off roughly around 1950, 60, 70, but it's just skyrocketing, right? And it probably won't change at that rate forever, but what we are seeing when we look at emerging and disruptive technologies is acceleration in ways that we have never seen before. Climate change, we're seeing climate take hold, extreme events in ways that we've never experienced before. We're seeing uncertainty around financing. We're seeing financing for infrastructure being held up in increasing political polarization in ways that we've never experienced before, right? So why did we have bipartisan support for massive infrastructure spending 3 years ago and nothing has happened? Why? Go back and look at that. It's all about politics that have almost nothing to do with infrastructure. Infrastructure is wrapped up in lots of other sort of political ideological spectrum issues. Infrastructure is now interdependent in ways that it never was before, right? So the Federal Aviation Administration, for example, is using year 2020 computer hardware and software on top of 1980 IBM mainframes, right? That simply wasn't true in 1980, but that's true today. So all of these things come together to create, what we would describe as complexity for not just today, but what we might experience in the next 100 years. And infrastructure is at the center of a lot of these trends, right? And yet we as educational institutions continue to operate as if it is 1950. And, we continue to emphasize goals and educational capabilities as if it is 1950, right? So at ASU, again, we're trying to rethink what it is that a transportation system should do. And fundamentally, what is a transportation system in the future, okay? So I want to point out, folks, that when I talk about the end of the century, roughly 100 years from now, there are people alive on the planet today, hopefully my 3-year-old and 1-year-old, that hopefully are alive at the end of the century. right? So this is not a pie in the sky 2100, no, nobody will ever experience that. No, there are people alive today that will be using systems based on the decisions that we make today for 2100, okay? Keep that in mind. So start with, what is a transportation system going forward, right? Is a transportation system, roads and vehicles and, governance processes as we've known them? Or is a transportation system now going to include Tesla battery packs in your garage and electric vehicles that not only consume energy, but can also push energy back into the grid, and solar charging around roadways, right? So will transportation systems include cyber technologies integrated in ways that we have never seen before, right? What is a transportation system? Is it now a transportation energy system? Is it now a transportation information system, right? We're starting to see this happen. And, we don't quite grasp the ramifications of that happening, right? What is it that a transportation system should do in the future, right? So here we are on Zoom. Some fraction of us will never go back to our physical offices after COVID, clears, whenever that is, right? Do I need to be a professor at ASU sitting in Tempe, the Phoenix metro area? Or could I be holed up in my, nice beachfront property in San Diego? I don't own that. That would be nice. And be a professor at ASU, right? Are we going to question this, right? That we as universities require people to move across the country and around the world to be members of the community at that university. And that's not just about the university, that's about anywhere, right? So I've been conducting workshops with some big infrastructure agencies, and they're saying to me, we're now seeing that there's certain divisions, certain departments that we never have to bring back to a physical office, right? We can just let them stay at home. There's certain that, of course, we want to bring back and need to, but there's certain that we don't, right? So, how is it that we think about transportation in the future? Is it sort of this interface of physical and virtual interaction? Is it something else? So I'm going to argue that fundamentally, what we need to be doing is thinking about transportation at the interface of stability and instability, okay? Climate extremes will become more frequent, extreme events will become more frequent. Uncertainty around financing doesn't seem to be going away. Political polarization seems to be getting worse, not better, creating instability in how we make decisions. Emerging and disruptive technologies are only going to happen faster and faster and faster. I can't fathom what my 3-year-old, who right now is able to say, hey, Google, play me a song, and is able to hear, and Google in the background, the Google thing literally listens to me, is literally able to play any song in the history of humanity within, wow, it's actually playing a song, sorry. My 3-year-old has figured this out, right? So how will they be interacting with transportation in the future? Will they ever go to a gasoline station, right? Hopefully he doesn't have the wonderful experience of going to gasoline stations that we've all had, right? I can't begin to fathom what it'll be like for him, but what I'm gonna argue is that the systems will need to be more agile and flexible. Right now, our systems are remarkably rigid. And I'm gonna say that agility and flexibility takes place across 3 domains of our transportation systems: the physical assets that we deploy, the governance structures that we use, and the educational norms that we teach, right? So, I can help on the third, but I think you guys can help on the first too. So right now we are very much structured for rigidity. We're very much structured around, the world is gonna operate the same way, climate, demand, technology, or otherwise for 30, 40, 50 years. That assumption is probably increasingly flawed, right? So what does it mean to be flexible and agile, right? Happy to get into that, but don't want to dive into the details until we have questions on it. So we need to think about what that means in terms of the technologies, the assets. We need to think about dynamic adaptive planning, basically saying, look, some portion of the system is going to be fixed, rigid, stable, but some portion of the system we need to be able to come back to over and over and over again and reassess whether it's the right asset for whatever it is that we've experienced now that we know a little bit better 10 years later, something along those lines. So that is how we at ASU are thinking about these issues. We are very much trying to build out the knowledge sets and capabilities and resources to position transportation for the future as it relates to a lot of these things. And hopefully that gives you guys a sense of kind of the innovation that's happening at ASU on this front. Thanks.
Thanks very much, man. I don't know if I'm going to be able to sleep tonight thinking about all this. Wow, it was extremely interesting. Elizabeth, do we have questions? We have a few minutes left. It was very interesting presentations from all four of our speakers. I really appreciate it. And I'll turn it to Elizabeth to see if we have some questions.
We didn't have any in the chat. I think everybody was wrapped in listening to everybody. There's a lot of really great information in this. So now's your moment. We're down to the last 5 or 6 or 7 minutes. So you guys must have questions other than Bus Genius, which is really interesting. As a bus rider personally, I would love to see this implemented all over. So questions, people, feel free to unmute yourselves and ask away or put it in the chat.
I'll ask one real quick for the Northern Arizona folks. Can you talk about some of your greatest challenges and perhaps some of your biggest successes or non-successes, perhaps?
Yeah, and we're probably not unique. I would say the biggest challenge is always going to end up being funding, right? We want pie in the sky, but it's got to be paid for. But I will tell you, to that end, one of our biggest successes in our 10 years is that we were able to convince the university to establish a transfer. So like many universities, our shuttle service, when I came into the department, shuttle service was basically financially living off of parking permit revenue, which meant that the parking permit revenue couldn't go to where it was intended, which is repairing parking lots. So both were suffering. Shuttle really was at the mercy of parking, which is not fair. And I'm a big data person. And so very quickly, I gathered some data from students. And what we were able to show is that 90% of students self-identified of using the campus shuttle at least once a week, but most of them use it multiple times a day. We continue that survey, and every year the results have never dipped down below 90%. So even students that have a vehicle, which tends to be between 30 and 35% of students, even those that have a vehicle still use our campus shuttle service, and that's because of the way that we zone the campus. And so we showed that 90% were using the service and only that 30% were paying for it, and that's not fair, and it does not make sense. And additionally, the service could not keep up with the demand with that funding mechanism. And so we were able to have a fee that was initiated. It is not charged to all students. Those that buy a permit, that fee is waived for them. They still get to benefit from that service. And then there's a couple of other folks that can request a waiver, but it has allowed shuttle to move forward exponentially. When I came into the department, poor Judy was basically all of the vehicles, and Judy, chime in for any of this, but all the vehicles were purchased used or so old that on any given day, half the fleet was broken. And so over the last 10 years, we've replaced everything. I will say one of the other challenges is when somebody purchased some buses for us and they were nothing but headache. I won't mention the kind of bus, but we constantly had blown turbos every time we turned around. So that was a challenge. Some of our other challenges, we don't have a storage facility. So our buses are parked outside right now. I know we're in Arizona, folks, but we get on average 100 inches of snow a year, and poor Judy's staff dig out the buses. So that is a challenge. But again, a success or an opportunity is the partnership we have with our city bus partner, where we are looking to build a bus storage and maintenance facility. So there's a few of them. You know, I tend to be my blood type is B positive, so I tend to be a positive person. So for every challenge, we try to say where we also have a success. Even with COVID, we have found some successes through COVID.
Thanks. Hey, John, I got a quick question. If I remember right, you told me that you own and use an electric vehicle, correct?
Yes, actually, that's all I drive.
So how is your university, UNR, looking forward to promote that? I mean, are they putting charging stations? Is that in your long range plans?
We have charging stations in each of the existing parking structures that we have, and we are putting more in the planned one. We just recently, one of the kind of equity issues that came up was that we were not and have not been up to this point charging, like billing people for the electricity that they draw out of those charging stations. And we are now implementing an EV parking permit. So you have to have a parking permit to park in the parking garages or anywhere on campus, actually. You can buy daily passes for some select lots. We're implementing an EV pass that will allow you to use the charging stations and get the electricity. It's a few extra dollars a month. It's not much, but and actually the intent of that is really to pay for the infrastructure, not for the electricity, to pay for the infrastructure of adding more charging stations. Personally, charging to me is going to be one of those issues that's going to go away fast because the cars are getting such longer and longer ranges. One of my 2 electric vehicles is a 2012 Nissan Leaf. It's got 85,000 miles on it, and its battery is not optimal, let's say. And so I really need to charge at work and home to make that commute. And so I have it's about an 18-mile commute, but I've got almost 2,000 vertical feet of climbing in the last 5 miles to get to my house. And that really kind of chews up that battery power pretty quick. So to me, charging is going to be less of the issue going forward. I think, you know, some of the stuff that was talked about in terms of vehicle to grid and grid to vehicle technologies, that might be a reason to have more of that infrastructure if we at some point have such a penetration of those vehicles that we could actually make a significant difference in terms of buffering peak load. But I think that's a ways down the road.
Okay, thanks, John. I know we're almost out of time, but I got one more question for Dr. Chester. Now, you know, you showed like the 10-year, or the 100 years kind of thing. Now, do you think as we move through this century that the changes are going to be sudden and abrupt, or is it going to be slow changes over a long time till we get to where we could be in by the end of the century?
Yeah, so it depends, right? So I think when you're talking about something like climate, right, climate change, you're gonna see both. You're gonna see the sort of gradual long-term change sprinkled in with more frequent, more intense in some places, not everywhere, extreme events, right? When it comes to something like cyber technologies, I think you're going to see lots of extreme events in the sense that you are going to see disruption occur in waves that happen more and more frequently, right? And you know, I think it's hard for us to fathom. Probably most of us on this call like grew up, you know, we're adults during the digital era, so to speak, right? And we went from no email to, you know, wherever we are now. I think the acceleration is going to be monumental, and you are going to see cyber tech integrated into our dumb legacy old systems faster and faster and faster. So sort of, it kind of depends on what dynamic you're looking at. You know, I also think that with cyberification, right, of everything, you've got wonderful new possibilities that emerge, but then you have tremendous vulnerabilities that emerge, right? So you know, whether that's ransomware attacks, which we now see are happening exponentially increasing, or, you know, infrastructure becoming a battlefield, right? You know, cyber warfare now taking place in your guys' systems. You know, we don't think about warfare like this. We think about two armies meeting head to head on a battlefield, right? That's the past century, the past millennia, right? Now it's going to take place in your systems. You know, some foreign nation will you know, penetrate your system and hold it hostage or do something with it because they don't like something that's happened, right? So I think that's a new reality of the world that we live in, right? And the sooner we come around to realizing that, I think the sooner we come around to asking, how do we get prepared for it?
Interesting. Hope I live long enough to see all that stuff, or some of it anyway.
Me too.
Hey, I just like to thank all our speakers today. I thought it was a great webinar. I appreciate your time. Once again, the Valley of the Sun chapter put this on. This is the 5th in, I think, a series of 7. We're looking to have another webinar in November and another one in December. So we'll keep you guys posted. Once again, I appreciate everybody on the line. If you aren't a member of ACT, think about it. And I'll just say goodbye. Thanks for your time, guys.
Thank you very much, everybody.